Greetings. Frederick Riddle here with another issue of Christian News and Views. This is episode 293, and this is Wednesday. So, yesterday I had my Bible talk for Tuesday, the first one for Tuesday, and tomorrow we'll resume on for the Thursday one, the Bible talk. So, today we're back to the news, but I'm going to keep it kind of short. One reason is this is Christmas week, and I just want to keep it a little bit on a higher note than it often is. But I also have a problem with the article itself. Um, I'm only going to comment on the opening paragraph because largely that whole article, in my opinion, is anti-Trump. It says things that they may believe are true, and it says things that are slanted in a certain way. It's just going to be too much um, garbage there to have to work through. So I want to focus on this opening paragraph, and here's the opening paragraph. The Supreme Court said Tuesday it would not allow President Donald Trump to deploy the National Guard in the Chicago area for now, a significant setback for his campaign to push troops into cities across the country over the objections of local and state leaders. But even that part of it is kind of tainted. Uh, uh, but anyhow, so it starts off that this is a setback. And to that part, I agree. It's a setback. He was wanting to send the troops in and get them in right away and get that mess cleared up. But is it a significant setback? And I had to think about this a little bit. And my end result, the short version is that depends. This determination was in regards to a pause ordered by lower courts for using the National Guard in Chicago. Um, there's a case going on about the being using the National Guard and everything. But from my reading of the article and trying to sift fact from fiction, and from other areas that I've been reading on it, it's not about this particular part order that the Supreme Court weighed in on does not affect the verdict because there is no verdict yet in that case. It is simply saying that the judge had ordered a pause while the court case continues. And sometimes that's a necessary thing. And then the Supreme Court weighed in on that. And there was enough conservatives, two, I believe, that voted with the liberals to uphold that order. Now, you can debate from all day long on whether they were right or wrong. To me, it is almost a procedural decision. And one of the Supreme Court justices actually agreed with the stand, but did it on narrower grounds. And so the just because they got together for this particular decision does not mean that this is a major or significant defeat for the Trump administration. To jump to the conclusion that the court will ultimately turn down the presidential use of the National Guard, which is, in my opinion, that's what they're implying, the article, is presumptuous at best. It was not about that. It was about the pause. And it was so they're just saying we need to wait and see how this proceeds. We want to see all the sides, the arguments, and so forth. And to be honest with you, although I may disagree with them, I can see at least I can see the necessity of why that might be the best way to go. On one hand, lives are at stake, people getting killed, um, and the local police don't seem to be able to do anything. Then you have ICE, they're in there, and they're being threatened. And again, just like in California, you have the violation and the attacks upon federal officers trying to do their job. Doesn't matter whether you agree with the means or not. That's something that can be resolved in the courts. But you don't. That does not give you, if you disagree with their what they're doing and how they're doing things, that doesn't give you the right to take the law in your own hand. And so it just means to me that the Trump administration did have a failure here. They failed to convince the court that an emergency existed and that it should overturn the lower court. And so I find myself in middle ground territory here. On the one side, I am in favor of law and order. I am in favor of the Trump administration being able to go in there and settle this. If it takes troops to do it, I see no problem doing it. In my mind, I go back to the early years of our country when President Washington sent troops in to put down what was called a rebellion by farmers, if I remember correctly. That wasn't I don't recall that as being an armed resistance. It may have been, but I don't recall it that way. As I recall it, they were resisting the law, resisting uh, the legal authority of the government to enforce some kind of court order or whatever regarding, well, I think it had to do with, may have had to do with whiskey and stuff like that. It's crops that they grew and then became a product. But the thing there was that President Washington sent in troops, and it may have been there wasn't any local police, or they were too small. In any case, ineffective local control, and so he had to send the troops in. I don't see a whole lot of difference there than this, where you have a large city that does have a police force, and because it's a large city, it's a large police force, but they seem to be unable to control uh, the area. The gangs seem to control different areas of the city, and there seems to be something coming out of there all the time. I can remember growing up, that was used to be the case in Detroit. Now, Detroit, Michigan, eventually got in control of things. I believe the state moved in and took over some things that for a while there, and then but eventually the city itself got its act together, cleaned house, got in some people who could enforce the law, both in police department, but also the political area, the political background that was needed, backbone that was needed. And so there was a case where they didn't have to send troops in, but later on, during the rioting, during the Vietnam War, there was the rioting. National Guard had to be sent in. So there's different reasons for sending a National Guard into a city. Usually it means that the city is unable or unwilling to do what is necessary to be done. And when you look at modern day Chicago, I tend to think that that the only Chicago police, I'm only being partial, somewhat um, joking, and it's not really a joke. There's a TV show out there. I believe the name of it is Chicago PD. I don't watch it, but I've seen their ads, and as opposed to other police department programs across the country, like I used to watch Blue Bloods all the time. It just seems to be different. But one thing is true: that in that TV show, the Chicago PD is in control. They're able to solve crimes. They're able to bring people to justice. But that's the only time you ever hear about it, is a TV show. Where are these police during the real police in Chicago? In New York, the police department, they've had a so-so, but it's sometimes good and sometimes bad record. But overall, they've been able to manage to keep the rule of law. But in Chicago, that seems to be hard to come by. And ICE agents are not being protected. Those are federal, I don't care what department they are. They are federal police officers, and therefore they should be protected. And they're apparently not. So I just think that in case of Chicago, I'm only partially joking when I say that the only police maintaining orders on the Chicago PD. If the court case ever gets to the Supreme Court, and there's no guarantee it will, but I think there's a possibility of it happening. I would expect a different result in the voting. For instance, the current Supreme Court leans towards supporting the Constitution. Almost every decision they've made has involved constitutional authority, usually of the president for whatever. People fight him on everything. But when it comes to the Constitution, that's when the Supreme Court gets very cautious, very protective of the Constitution. Now, I'm not talking about the Nancy Pelosi Constitution. Hers was between her ears, and that's the only place it existed. The Constitution that founders of this country got together and formed and wrote and put their names to, and staked their lives and everything else to. That is the one that the Constitution, that the Supreme Court is assigned. It's their duty to protect, to enforce, to maintain, to guard. So I believe that that's what they're doing here. They're being very cautious, and they shouldn't be judged by people against that. You may disagree with the decision, but I think that they're being cautious, maybe overly, but that's just we can disagree with them on that, but that's their responsibility to watch over the Constitution. So there's been nothing to indicate any other result other than they're shooting down the pause. They're saying, no, let it continue. And if it gets bad enough, then we can wait, that can be, the pause could be lifted or whatever. They could come back again. Right now, they're saying, let's wait and see how the case goes. Let's get some more information. Let's get all the facts out there that we can. Now, I know I'm reading between the lines here, but sometimes that's all you have is to read between the lines. But the thing is this, the Supreme Court is not making a final verdict here. They're only saying no to the pause. Let's continue the court case and see what happens. And I may disagree with some of the thinking. Some of it I do agree with. But in the end, I can't disagree with the idea of being cautious. You don't want to be giving the president authority he doesn't have or taking away authority he does have. So they're just saying at this point in time, let's wait and get all the facts we can before we are faced to make this kind of a decision. It will have repercussions not only now, but in the future. Not only for President Trump, but any president in the future. Well, that's it for today. Hope I've informed you, encouraged you, and inspired you, or at least one of those three. And also I continue to look for your comments. I take it seriously. I check that. Any comments there, I promise to always read them and respond to them. And someday, one of those comments may end up on this show. I don't know, but it could. Well, you have a great day. Tomorrow is Christmas. I hope you do join me for the Bible talk tomorrow. But whether you do or not, have a great and wonderful and blessed Christmas. I'll see you then.